Hello, and welcome to Autology, the weekly podcast that brings you the latest on automotive technology. This week's episode is called Display's Arms Race, Where Will It Lead? And you're here with me, Yanina Mills. We have Aaron Dale, user experience expert for the Supply Chain and Technology Group, alongside Jeremy Beauchaude, Director for EE and Semiconductors for the Supply Chain and Technology Group within S&P Global Mobility. Hello to you both, and thank you for joining this week's episode of Autology.
Hi, Janina. Thank you for the introduction.
Hi, Janina. Good to join.
So this week's episode is about the growing number of displays in vehicles. So the first question that I have is just how fast are displays multiplying in the vehicle, and what factors are driving this growth?
Yeah, that's a good question, Jana. So, it's hard not to notice the display's arms race that we've seen, particularly over the last decade. And here we've been actively tracking the primary and kind of secondary displays being added to the vehicle over that time. And when we gather together, all of our data, which looks at displays such as the center stack display, instrument cluster, HVAC dedicated displays, new technology and applications like camera mirror displays, front passenger displays, and traditional rear passenger displays as well. We're looking at over 115 million extra displays being added to our forecast from 2020 to 2026. Such that by the end of our forecast here, we have over 250 million displays, automotive displays being fitted in 2026 alone. So we do see this influx and tidal wave of new displays being fitted in the vehicle. And I think what makes this time pretty unique is that we have really the merging of two factors that are driving this market. So we're still at this moment of time seeing first-time introductions in the mass market or lower segment vehicles, but also we're seeing second displays being added for the first time, particularly digital instrument clusters. Now these are a display that's particularly appealing to designers. They're very kind of driver focused and safety focused. They play well with the road that we see in ADAS and autonomy. I think they allow the OEM the ability to customize and reconfigure a digital display rather than having to retool and reconfigure a non-digital display. And as such, we're seeing an extra 22 million digital instrument clusters being added to the forecast here. We're seeing this further boosted by the path we have towards electrification and EVs in the market, being able to display battery charge level, driving mode, etc. on the digital cluster is a really essential feature for these vehicles. So it's being further kind of boosted by that trend towards electrifications. And then, we still see center stack displays being an area of growth for new displays being added to the vehicle here. And actually a large proponent of this is a move that we've seen in recent times towards multi-module displays. Now these might be, large displays that could sit kind of pillar to pillar and consist of multiple display modules. The MBUX was one of the earlier examples from Mercedes-Benz, and subsequently the Hyperscreen that they now have. But we see this technology being readily adopted by other brands as well. So including Honda, BMW, and Hyundai, for example. And I think when we get into the business of counting individual display panels, this trend is particularly powerful because we're no longer looking at one central information display. We're looking at now 3, sometimes more displays when we break out these individual panels that sit under one cover glass of a multi-module display. So, actually we're seeing fitment of these units jump from what is now around 1% globally to 10%, a massive jump by 2026. So this is something that we've seen rolled out in many of the luxury brands, and now we see the fast followers really looking to take on this approach as well. So in addition to the recent trends that are continuing, we see a bunch of kind of new display applications that are really accelerating the addition of displays within vehicles. So one example of this is the camera mirror system, so replacing conventional physical mirrors with camera systems, or even augmenting the rear view mirror with a camera system. So we've seen brands such as Audi and Honda begin to introduce these systems for the first time. And again, we're seeing a massive jump in fitment from 1.7% currently to almost 10% again by 2026 of these new applications. And as with many of these trends, the move to electrification is something that's really supporting adoption rates here. So when you look at replacing the benefits of replacing a physical mirror with a camera system, really you're improving the drag coefficient, and that converts into additional mileage or additional range for electric vehicles. Something marketers have been very keen to tout, and really sits well in order to compete globally there. As well as, again, on the ADAS side, a focus still on safety. So rear view systems really help to reduce that blind spot without such a big change for consumers to have to get used to that. But yeah, I think in terms of factors here, I think when we're looking at the amount of new displays that are being added to the vehicle, it's sometimes easy to miss the other story that's just as big here. When we look at the quality of the displays themselves improving alongside the quantity of displays within the vehicle. So we can look at this in terms of display size. So if you take just the center stack display, for example, in 2020, our data shows an average of 8.5 inches. But that will rise to 9.5 inches by 2026. So there's a trend towards displays getting bigger in the first instance. But then when you look at what these displays are being used for and the requirements of the displays, you see a matching growth towards higher resolution displays and increased pixel density. So we have around 190 pixels per inch on average at the moment, and that will rise to 230 as the displays are required to run several more applications, and are increasingly becoming a way to differentiate and compete in terms of the look and feel of the cabin. We've even seen plenty of examples of collaborations. I think one recently we saw between Volvo and Epix Games, really focusing on that kind of enhancement of the graphics and the outputs of the display. So yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of activity kind of across the board, and it's really exciting to see those new applications, but also refining some of those kind of initial primary and secondary displays being added to the vehicle.
Yeah, and I completely agree with this multiplication of display as Aaron has been describing, and I'd like to bring maybe a different angle. My team is looking at the chips, at the semiconductor, and we've been surveying this area for the last year to really understand what it means in terms of processing power to drive all of these displays. And we really see talking to OEMs and tier ones, we see really the number of displays being driven here increasing from 2 to 3 today, very rapidly going to 6 to 8 in one cockpit in the next 3-4 years. And one OEM also told us by 2030 they will have some cars with 12 or 14 displays. So it's a massive amount. I mean, it's not going to be every car like this. That's going to be more the upper segment, but that really shows here this explosion here of the number of displays. And as Aaron has mentioned as well, we really see the increase of the total number of pixels, because this has a big impact here on the processing power on the system on chip to control these displays. And while right now in a cockpit, we see a total of typically maximum 3-4 megapixel, we really see it growing very fast to 6, 7, 8. On here again, around 2030, in some extreme case, we hear a need for 36 megapixel in total in a car. And just as a comparison, a TV and a 1080p TV has just 2 megapixel, a 4K TV has 8 megapixels. So imagining here a car cockpit with 36 megapixel is incredible, but it is the way the industry is going. We really see it here with the demand on the chips, on the processors. And in terms of drivers, Aaron has already touched on the electrification being a very, very big driver, and we see that as well. We see as well that the hardware to enable this multiplication of displays to support efficiently this implementation of many displays in one car, starting to finally to be here. And one need to understand that typically each display until now has been driven by one controller. For example, the center stack display driven by the head unit with one processor for each display. And so if you have a digital instrument cluster, you will have another processor there. If you have a head-up display, you will have another processor there. And these processors are quite expensive, tens of dollars per processor. So in a standard architecture, it's really not manageable, not affordable to just have as many controllers on as many expensive processors as displays. So in order to save cost, the vision has already been there for quite a few years in the industry to consolidate, to use a domain controller with one single controller, with one single powerful processor to drive all of these displays. But until now, there was not such a processor on the market enabling to control 3, 4 or more displays. I was talking about 7, 8 very, very soon or even more. But this is what's changing here. We see right now the emergence of very powerful system on chips from suppliers which come not from the traditional chip for automotive industry, but more from the mobile phone industry. So Samsung, for example, has a very powerful processor, which has been used in some of the Audi cockpit, for example, for the last 2 years. We see Qualcomm coming as well with a very powerful processor, its third generation Snapdragon coming in the second half of this year for some Chinese car first. And these are really the trigger or the enabler to implement efficiently these multiple displays with one single controller on one single SoC, which can control all of these processors. And it's not only efficient in terms of cost, but also in terms of user experience. If you want to be able to move quickly the content from one display, from your instrument cluster to your center stack display or to your passenger display, very intuitively, you really can't do that if it's all in silos with one processor for each display. So here for the overall user experience in the cockpit, it's really important to have one very powerful processor managing from one place all of these displays. And this is really what's just starting to happen here in the last, I would say, the last year and a half. These processors start to hit the market, and there will be much more now coming in the next 2 years.
Great, that's very interesting. So you mentioned some of the trends, like the transition to multi-module displays and the size and resolutions increasing, thanks to the more recent development of powerful single processors. But there's also the variation by OEM. Maybe if you could maybe elaborate a little bit more here. Do you see certain types of OEMs or regions going further than others?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So, I'd say that we see activity across the board here, and virtually every brand and OEM recognizes the importance of kind of shaping the user experience and the kind of displays experience within the cabin. However, we do see some variation in exactly how OEMs are rolling out this new technology. So when you take the, let's say, luxury brands in Europe, for example, we do see this kind of clustered around some of their sub-brand offerings, particularly their kind of electrified sub-brand offerings. So Mercedes-Benz EQ, BMW iX, and VW ID vehicles, for example. And we see bold new statements, something that kind of captures imagination, and new technology kind of being rolled out within these kind of electrified sub brands. So I mentioned earlier the Hyperscreen on the EQS by Mercedes, which is really a 55-inch curved display that kind of blends together a 12-inch digital cluster, a 17-inch center stack display, and then a dedicated 12-inch display for the front passenger, including OLED technology for the CSD and the passenger display. So we see this in the EQS vehicle. We see the new iDrive in BMW's iX vehicle with the multi-display module there. And we see, when we look at the likes of VW and the ID.3, we're seeing some of the first introductions of augmented reality head-up displays, which is another large driver of display applications within the vehicle. So I think what we see here is these new platforms really offering the ability to build these technologies in from the ground up, but also they capture a lot of attention, and they don't move they appeal here to consumers that are very interested in all forms of automotive technology, I think, generally, and they don't risk alienating some of their core customer base, which they're not always at risk of doing, but we're seeing this introduce and kind of test approach before rolling out throughout the rest of the nameplates and models within brands. On the other side here, we're seeing electrification really driving a lot of new brands entering the market for the first time. In fact, in our forecast, we've tracked around 75 new EV brands entering the forecast in the last 6 years. And what these guys really need is a competitive edge. We find that they're really utilizing this new technology to make an impact in the market and capture attention here. We're seeing China as a region be particularly active in using display-based and new HMI technology to really make that appeal. Byton is an example of just pure display kind of real estate here, where we saw a massive 48-inch curved touchscreen with 4K resolution there. But just to kind of take this a little bit, I think we're already seeing, some examples of looking to kind of refine the introduction of displays and focus more on the integration and the kind of form factor here. So I mean, Tesla's always been a leader in terms of kind of design innovation, and we've seen to some extent a kind of a minimalistic approach from them, where they concentrate on one large kind of center display and not look to roll out multiple displays quickly within the vehicle. So certainly we do see different approaches, but kind of uniting the industry. We do see every brand, I think, recognizing the importance of technology as a way to kind of differentiate in the market space at the moment.
Yeah, and from the integration point of view, so with a cockpit domain controller controlling with one single processor multiple displays, we really see as well differences here in by OEMs on even more by regions. We see China really being the fast adopter for this kind of architecture with one controller for multiple displays. The EV brands, the startups like NIO, like XPeng, etc., have been some of the first to embrace this approach. But also the more established Chinese brands, they also see this implementation as a way to compete against the German brands, to compete on the cockpit with multiple displays, but in an efficient, cost-efficient way. So that's why we see here in China a fast adoption, faster than anywhere else, of this cockpit domain controller with a single SoC. Similarly, in India as well, we see the adoption quite early with on the higher end SUV segment, for example, from Mahindra. Europe is actually quite well positioned in the race. Daimler was the very first one to implement this kind of architecture with the A-Class around 2019 here, deploying one single controller from Visteon here, one cockpit domain controller from Visteon on managing both instrument cluster on the center stack display. Volkswagen as well here, echoing the comment from Aaron on the impact of electrification. Here, Volkswagen, like many other brands, is starting deploying these architectures on its electric platforms. So the ID.3, for example, is the first car deploying a cockpit domain controller, managing the head-up display, as well as the instrument cluster here. And the PSA as well on the volume segment here has started in volume already last year. So with the 308, the DS4, for example, with one single controller from Marelli. The US is a little bit behind, but it's coming. We see GM being the first one. In the second half of the year, we'll start deploying some cockpit domain controller with one single SoC for multiple displays. We expect Ford to come a little bit later, probably around 24, 25. And then the US brands of Stellantis should come next year as well. So it's coming soon. Korea is, we've seen only one example there from Hyundai with more on the high end, so with Genesis, with a GV60. We were expecting some of the innovative electric or hybrid cars like the Ioniq, which has an interesting display implementation with some of its pillar displays to replace the side mirror. We were expecting they may benefit from such an architecture, but no, it's a standard architecture there. And then Japan is much more conservative than the other regions. We see very few examples here from Nissan in the next 2 years, but we don't see any significant deployment of this kind of architectures with one controller for multiple displays before 2025 here. And even the Honda E, which is a great example here of a digital cockpit with very big passenger display here. This one we looked on is using a traditional implementation here with one controller, one processor per display. So not quite as innovative here as the other regions here.
So you explained, I guess, the driving factors for some of the technology, right? But if you could maybe explain more generally, what kind of applications are ultimately driving this increased display fitment?
Yeah, so I think we have a couple of different things kind of going on here. So we have a kind of in the short term, we have a lot of activity around kind of fitting displays for kind of look and feel, a kind of competitive benefit, but also on the safety side as well. I think there's a lot of focus on making sure everything is still driver focused. We're seeing a lot of features and functions and capabilities being added to vehicles, and I think this is going to sound a little bit counterintuitive, but take the instrument cluster display, digital instrument cluster display, for example, being able to put critical information, critical driver information in front of the driver within their eye line really does help to reduce driver distraction, which could be a problem if we don't properly think out how to kind of implement displays and what applications are kind of available at the moment. So I think we're seeing it in the short term kind of twofold. First, being able to create that kind of branded kind of modern interior of the vehicle, but secondly to be able to cope with and integrate many of the new technologies that we're seeing impact the space within the cabin, and I think that plays into the longer term as well. So as we look past the kind of 5-year horizon, even if you look at things like over-the-air updates, we'll see more than 6 times more vehicles with OTA capabilities as we do now. We've already seen the likes of the BMW kind of theater screen, which is a 31-inch rear passenger entertainment display. So we start to see the design being opened up for infotainment and entertainment purposes, and I think that really ramps up once we look into the future, once we start seeing level 4 or more automated vehicles, allowing the driver and the passenger to disengage from that kind of process of driving and be able to access more features and functionalities on their display. So I think we see kind of a natural evolution in terms of what's critical for now, and what really enhances that kind of passenger experience in the longer term.
Yeah, and I concur with Aaron here on the impact of megatrends. So we talked already about the impact of electrification here. From the electrification angle, there is another aspect as well. When we were challenging some of the tier ones and OEMs on why you really need such a powerful processors like those from Samsung or Qualcomm or AMD here, gaming came up. On gaming related to EV cars, where when you're waiting at the charging station here, you need to be entertained as well, and that's also one of the driver to have really big displays for the driver and for the passengers here to be able to to be entertained while they have to wait for the car to be recharged, and that's one of the drivers here for very powerful processors and the need for some of these chips like from AMD, for example. We touched also on autonomous driving being one of these drivers. So yes, as the driver is disengaged, we see that as well. There will be more opportunity here to to look at or to use more displays. And if we go even further, with L4 cars becoming robotaxi, there is not only for the passenger or for the drivers, but there will be more displays for new use cases. Here, the displays can be used for advertising. We've seen some concept with even display outside the car for advertising. So that's another further applications, a little bit further out here. But yeah, there is again, the multiplication of displays very much related to these mega trends here of connectivity with OTA, as Aaron mentioned, electrification on autonomy.
So does this evolution have an impact on the supply chain at all?
I think it definitely does. So, you know, I think one thing we're seeing already is that OEMs are, you know, demanding that kind of common look and feel within the cabin, and really that that means that, you know, it's really kind of benefiting the whole solution providers. So, you know, when it comes to, you know, kind of making displays, automotive displays for the vehicle, there's some kind of, you know, additional steps the tier ones and panel providers need to work with, such as the display needs to operate within a kind of wide range of temperatures, and it needs to be kind of certified as safe in the event of a crash. So these are really kind of tailored solutions, and really we're seeing tier ones looking to kind of rapidly onboard new skills and kind of develop partnerships to increase the kind of scope of their overall offering, almost to become a kind of one-stop shop to OEMs. And, you know, OEMs are, you know, really looking to outcompete each other here by looking to be the first to implement new technology, and the ability for them to work with you know, a single supplier or a couple of suppliers in partnership really speeds up that transition to market for this new technology. So we've already seen, you know, lots of you know, Faurecia and Hella joining, and, you know, an uptick here in kind of mergers and acquisitions within the sector, as you know, we see tier ones looking to create more of a customized offering, looking to perhaps develop specialities. We have likes of, you know, Continental with kind of 3D technology, and you know, the likes of OLED and the typical kind of panel suppliers there as well. So yeah, I think the strive not just to add more displays to the vehicle, but to integrate them and link them in a way that creates an overall kind of user experience, you know, really strives OEMs to push to have, you know, a complete portfolio of products and integration capability and kind of developed partnerships. So yeah, we see a lot more kind of collaboration in the market, along with kind of customization and kind of working more closely with OEMs in kind of development and design.
Yeah, and we see further impact here on the supply chain as the overall cockpit experience here depends so much in future from the processor, from the SoC here, which manages all of these displays. There is a risk here for the tier one to be relegated as a simple contract manufacturer here, because the car maker now is actually directly choosing its SoC, its system on chip. They go directly to AMD, to Qualcomm, to Samsung, to Renesas here to define, okay, I want to work with this SoC, and then in the end, the tier one no longer has the say on, just needs to implement the technology choice of the OEM. So it's just like Aaron was saying, it's really important the tier ones are adapting on one focus is really on the software integration. Aaron was mentioning the integration here, but from the software point of view, we see probably more acquisition coming in future, because for the tier one here, integrating this overall cockpit experience here is, if they offer the cockpit domain controller, becomes key. And we see also some shifts possibly of supply chain here in the of supply market share on the processor itself. If you're looking at the past 5 years here, the processor suppliers for infotainment, for the center stack display of instrument cluster, when it was just one processor per display, these were the traditional chip suppliers, you know, the Texas Instrument with YOMAP, Renesas, NXP. These have been until and are still now in volume and in revenue the biggest suppliers of processors for driving these displays. But as you move towards a different approach with one single processor for multiple displays, this processor needs to be so much more powerful. So we are, just as without going too much in detail here, the power of the performance of a processor is typically measured in kilo DMIP, so for millions of operations per second here. And typically today, most processors are 2 to 5. The most powerful processor until recently were 50. So the NVIDIA processor and the S-Class, for example, and there are 2 of them, one in the instrument cluster and one is in the head unit, are around 50 KDMIPs here. But what we see now emerging is rapidly 100. So from Samsung, for Audi, for example, the last year and a half, 200, or coming, or since last year, from AMD for Tesla, about 100, 120 coming from Qualcomm later this year. So you see already a multiplication by a factor 10 or more of a processing power, which is going there. And the traditional processor suppliers don't have a technology, they don't have a process nodes to go into this kind of performance. So it means for this single processor in a domain controller controlling 3, 4, 5 more displays, we really see that there is a risk that the traditional vendors here will have a hard time to follow this race and will be relegated maybe on the lower end, so just for a standard implementation for head unit or for the lower end of a market. So there is a danger here for the traditional processor vendors for infotainment in cars. And even on the low end, we see these are actually challenged as well from companies coming from a mobile phone industry. Today, there is Qualcomm and MediaTek as 2 big modem providers, so baseband processor for mobile phone industry. These have gone into the automotive display processor as well. So Qualcomm starting to be very powerful, but we see MediaTek as well being right now very, very aggressive and very successful on the lower end here. So putting in danger the traditional it's Texas Instrument, Renesas, and NXP, for example. So we see some shift here from this point of view on the supply chain. On maybe a last point here as well, when a car maker is choosing a processor vendor for its portfolio of cars, it doesn't want to have to redevelop all of the applications for the low end, for the mid end, and for the high end. So ideally, a car maker wants a scalable platform. So they want to choose a processor vendor which has a family of processors which can handle everything from the lower end to the high end. And today, there are very few processor suppliers which really have this broad portfolio from the premium to the economy. The most scalable or the broadest portfolio we see is from Qualcomm today, with some very premium parts, but going down to the mid-range. they don't really have a low-end part. But from this point of view here, we really see Qualcomm because it has the broadest portfolio. It's a lot of OEMs choose Qualcomm now because it is a partner which enables to have this scalable platform here and enables you not to have to redevelop all of the application, all of the software for this integration. So yeah, from this point of view, we really see the supply chain ecosystem being shaken here and the cards being reshuffled in this industry.
Yeah, that's really good to know. And I guess just before we wrap up today's episode, I think it would be interesting to get your take on the future, say 5 years from now. How do we expect the pace to change, and what new factors might come into play?
So good question. I think what we'll start to see when we look further afield, past 5 years, is real influence by the move to autonomous driving and electrification. So we see 1.8 million autonomous level 4 vehicles being produced in 2027, and as I mentioned before, I think this will give design teams their first real chance of design for infotainment and entertainment purposes. We're also likely to see a move away from competing on sheer screen size or number of displays within the vehicle towards a focus really on the overall look, feel, and function of the cabin. So perhaps we see new uses for the space and the dash. One example we've actually seen recently with a new Nissan Ariya is the use of a smart surface and integrating HVAC haptic capacitive buttons straight onto the dash, and I think we're going to see more of this kind of customization and closer integration within the cabin. We're also seeing changes in display form factors. The Fisker has recently revealed its center stack display that can actually rotate, a 17-inch display. But really, I think the game changer here is the move towards augmented reality HUD. So we've seen the first introductions of true AR systems in the VW ID.3 and also the S-Class. And we're expecting this to become far more commonplace by 2026, with over 1 million systems being fitted in vehicles in that year. And not only does that allow you to really augment the driving experience, perhaps kind of navigation, pedestrian recognition, but also these systems really have the capacity to evolve into overall infotainment platforms, being able to register kind of points of interest and integrate with voice control and gesture control, such that really it takes the burden off of purely displays as an output within the vehicle. So we really see that as probably the standout area where we will see the most activity and overall just that move towards a closer integration and a more considered and refined interior, and a move away from almost one-upmanship in terms of adding displays to the vehicle.
Yeah, and on this aspect here, we don't see a slowdown of this trend, and we've been looking a little bit further out than 2026 here. We've been looking through 2030 and beyond in our research here for this cockpit domain controller forecast on SoC forecast we will publish next month. And I mentioned earlier already, we see here a rapid increase here of a number of display controlled by one single processor, from 2 to 3 today in the very early example of a cockpit domain controller right now, to 3 to 4, 7, 8 around 27, 20, 26, 27. But in some cases, as I mentioned before, some of the US brands here already planning implementation of 12, 14 displays here, controlled by one single controller here. So it's it's beyond what we would have imagined 2 or 3 years ago. And in terms of processing power as well, we had actually to raise our forecast here. We are tracking the specification here, and in a cockpit here, while today we may be maximum around the 100 kDMIPS, this operation, a million of operation per second, which is used today in a high-end cockpit. We hear the demand for 500 up to 1,000 around 2030. So it's it's incredible. There is an explosion here of a processing requirement in the cockpit to accompany all of this display. And it's again, it's not coming from processor vendors. It's coming directly from car makers here. This kind of demand. So it's not a pure technology push. And in terms of implementation architecture, right now, last year there were less than 1 million cars on the market with a cockpit domain controller, so one single controller for multiple displays. It's really taking off in 23, 24 with this. And this coincides with the arriving on the market of new generation processors here from Qualcomm, from Samsung, for example. But by 2030 here, we expect it will be close to 40%. So very rapid adoption of these new architectures with a domain controller to support these multiple displays. So it's this trend here, we see it from our study is coming fast.
Great. Thank you, both of you, Aaron and Jeremy, for your insights on this. It's certainly an exciting topic, especially as the consumer actually sees more displays in the vehicle with different applications and the designs. But it's certainly important to understand the ramifications on processing, on supply chain, and overall strategies. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. So thank you to you both for joining Autology.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Janina.
And thank you to all of you listeners for tuning in as well. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode at our autology@ihsmarket.com email. And you can find out much more at autotechinsight.ihsmarket.com. Don't forget to hit all the subscribe, follow, and like buttons to stay on track with the latest Autology podcasts. And we look forward to you joining us again in the next episode. Bye-bye for now.